Okay, so I'm Sierra Richardson, and this is a rhetorical analysis of Walter Dean Myers and three of his children's book works. So, just a little bit of background about the author and, some of his intentions, how he got into writing. So, he was born in Virginia. His mother died when he was 2. He moved to Harlem and was adopted by an interracial couple. He had a speech impediment and fought a lot at school and kind of had a difficult time at school. But he felt very connected overall to his neighborhood and his church, which was reflected a lot in his writing, especially in the setting of his stories. All of the stories that we're going to be discussing today were all set in Harlem. Reading got him through very tough times, like his uncle's murder. And he also had a teacher in high school who really inspired him to keep writing. He decided to write about his own experiences and the experiences of Black youth, and to just kind of put that down to paper, and just he felt validated finally by writing about his experiences and getting them out there to other people. So the first book we're going to talk about today is Harlem. And Harlem is a poem by Walter Dean Myers that's also illustrated by his son, and it's just a poem about Harlem. So I found during this assignment that the best way to go about analyzing Walter Dean Myers' work is just line by line, because there is just so much going on a rhetorical level. He uses a lot of literary devices to keep things engaging and interesting and not so cut and dry. And so let's get right into it. So in Harlem, there's a lot of repetition. So he repeats the phrase, a wrench of heart from Gorée Island, which is an island in Senegal that he is making an allusion to, and it was part of the transatlantic slave trade. And he repeated this for emphasis, that and to say a wrench of heart, that's obviously, if something is heart wrenching, it's an atrocity, which is exactly what happened at Gorée Island was an atrocity. He also uses the metaphor that Harlem was a promise, and that can entail so much. A promise of what? Kind of makes the reader look into more and think, what exactly is Harlem promising? Who is Harlem a promise to? It kind of gets the reader thinking more about what Harlem means to him and to the people of Harlem. Like a scream torn from the throat of an ancient clarinet. That's a simile. And we're comparing, using the word like, a scream. I don't think anything that's compared to a scream is necessarily, a good thing. And especially torn from the throat of an ancient clarinet, that's gotta be one hell of a scream. So, first heard in the villages in Ghana, Mali, and Senegal. So, the word villages here is really important, because in the next line, he speaks about an asphalt village, which is an example of juxtaposition, because, asphalt and village don't really go hand in hand. You think of a village, you think of, maybe huts, you think of grasslands, you think of savannas, you think of, this lush kind of landscape. And then to think about asphalt, that's something gray and, just, polar opposites in general. He speaks of a new sound, sassy. This personifies the sound of Harlem. And, it really gives Harlem this personality. We start to see Harlem take on a life of its own. He uses words like cascading and euphonious, which are pleasant to the ear. And, his diction overall is just like a jazz of words, Riffing past resolution is an example of alliteration. It rolls off the tongue, it gives the poem rhythm, and that's why Walter Dean Myers chooses to use words like this, or phrases. We hope, we pray. This is an example of anaphora, and it emphasizes we and the synthesis, or this being together, this togetherness. And yeah, he also does this when he refers to our black skins reflecting the face of God. Our, really bringing the reader and everyone into this central experience of our. And it brings you into that place of unity and reflecting the face of God, because God is in all of us. And that's what Walter Dean Myers is trying to get across to the reader, is this feeling of unity. Much like he felt, in his neighborhood, in his church. He also speaks about storefront temples, which is kind of a funny thing to think about if you're not from an urban area. You might think, like, what is a storefront temple? I really don't know how else to put it, but it's like the hood churches. They don't by any means look like a temple or sanctuary, but they're sacred to the community nonetheless, because it's all that we have. It looks like somebody's house or a corner store, but it's a sacred place. Jive and Jehovah artists. This is another example of alliteration, and he uses some kind of, I would say, kind of dated diction, I guess, because to be jive means you're lame, and yeah, it kind of just takes you into this place of kind of being kind of in the past, I would say. Here he uses the phrase the human canvas, and this is a metaphor, comparing humans to art and the blank canvas, and life being kind of what you make of it. You have a blank canvas, you can paint whatever you want on it. So I guess he's kind of saying that life is what you make of it. He speaks about the mood indigo. Indigo is a shade of blue, so that kind of brings about a melancholic tone with that colorful imagery. A chorus of summer herbs, that's coming together to make music, personification. That also, really drives home that theme of unity once again. He speaks about hip strutting past fried fish joints on Lenox Avenue in steamy August, and wow, lots of rhythm in that, alliteration, imagery. You start being able to see the hips strutting, smell the fish frying, feeling the steam of August. It really just brings you into the place of that is Harlem. They speak about a carnival of children, and that implies that they're having fun. It's kind of a free-for-all. There's tons of kids. He talks about playing Ringolevio and stickball, and those are games that are native to New York boroughs, and it just implies that the kids are having a good time, and he's bringing in that New York slang, New York diction. He talks about the coming of the blues, which is personification, and it implies like this impending doom, or like this idea that sadness will inevitably come when their childhoods come to an end. Yeah, so he speaks about darkness being lightened at the Cotton Club, which is an allusion to a famous club where black entertainers showcase their talents instead of, focusing on that darkness. He's saying, we did, of course, have those moments of clarity, that moments of brightness where we could just showcase all the beauty that is the black experience and not just focus on, everything else. He speaks of one people, 100 different people, and unity is a huge theme in this poem, and this is also an example of juxtaposition, because we talk about one people, 100 different people. That's kind of conflicting ideas, but they kind of work together at the same time. Crowded Dreams kind of gives off the vibe to the reader that there is a little bit of competition and there isn't enough room for everyone to achieve their dreams. And that could be due to some sort of inequality. He also says, a full-lipped saint washing collard greens in a cracked porcelain sink. This is just a beautiful sentence. It rolls off the tongue beautifully, lots of rhythm, and it's, definitely a metaphor with the cracked porcelain sink, for we make do with what we have. And, you know, our sink may be cracked, but it still washes greens just fine. He speaks about a cracked reed and soprano sax laughter, and you know, if you've played a woodwind instrument, then you know like a cracked reed is very, very high pitched cackle, and it was just a really interesting metaphor for him to use to convey that like hyena like sound. He speaks about floats over a fleet of funeral cars. This is alliteration, it creates some rhythm, and he's also using some military diction, using the word fleet, but it's almost like he's empowering even the negative aspects. Like, you know, you think about a funeral and you think about all the pain that comes with it, but he's saying like we're a fleet, you know, we come together in these times of darkness as a fleet, you know. It implies a great deal of strength. The wind stops and listens to the sound. This is once again personification, just makes the poem overall really interesting, especially for young readers. You know, if you think about Harlem as a place, but also having this personality to it. A huddle of thorns, alliteration. Oh, a huddle of horns, excuse me. That's alliteration. A tinkle of glass is some kind of fun diction. Excuse me. You know, he could easily just say, you know, a bit of glass, but a tinkle is just, it brings new life into the poem, and it makes it so much more enjoyable to read. A note handed down from Marcus to Malcolm, to a brother too bad and too cool to even give his name. I think there's a lot to this sentence, and it really speaks to just those who came before us and paved the way for us, and how we have to use the opportunities that they've given us and, you know, pay homage to that and not be closed-minded or forget about those sacrifices that were made for us to have or be in the positions that we are in now. So I think that was obviously an allusion to, you know, Malcolm X and other activists. He also says, sometimes there are endless depths of pain, singing a cappella on the street corners, and sometimes not. So when he says sometimes there and sometimes not, you know, that's an example of parallelism, and also it just speaks to the inconsistency of the Black experience overall, due to obviously so much just inconsistency. I don't really know how else to put it. He also speaks about a cappella, which is singing without any backing, and, you know, after the effects of slavery, Jim Crow, we don't really have that backing or that foundation or, you know, generational wealth. We just don't have any of that. We're kind of singing on our own and, you know, making music in the meantime with what we have. And in this case, when you're singing a cappella, all you have is your voice. So we're kind of using that voice because it's all we have. We kind of, yeah, this sentence just, it's pretty heavy. We don't really know what cards were dealt in life, and it's, you know, lots of inequality, inequity, but we make do with what we can, and, you know, sometimes there are some moments of clarity, so that's what he means by, you know, and sometimes not. And yeah, a journey on the A train that started on the banks of the Niger and is not ended. I thought this was a beautiful way to end the poem, kind of sum everything up and just show that, you know, that journey, you know, even though it wasn't a consensual journey, it happened, we're here, we can't be stopped, we are still here, our journey has not ended, this is not where it ends. We've come so far, this isn't our homeland, but we are doing our best every day to make it our own, and I really think that that was just the perfect way to close this poem off. So next we are going to analyze Looking Like Me, and lots of onomatopoeia in this poem.